Hey guys, it's Saga from Tecworkz, and here is my very detailed camera review of the 2020 iPhone SE. I have had this phone for about 10 days, and in that time, I have put it through rigorous Tecworkz style camera test. By now, I have clicked close to 750 images and videos with it in various lighting conditions, and I am going to share about 70 of those in this video, so you guys know how this camera performs in every one of these situations. Now the iPhone SE gets just two cameras, one at the front and one at the back. Looking at what other manufacturers are doing by adding 3, 4 or even 5 cameras just at the back of their phone, even thinking of a phone having a single camera sounds a bit outdated. With this phone, Apple wants to show us that the number of cameras don't matter and you can achieve plenty with even a single rear camera and a very capable processor and software combo to back it up. Now is this true, or is it going to be just another average camera? Let's find out. The one and only camera at the back gets the same sensor as the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 10. It is a 12 megapixel sensor with f1.8 aperture and it gets optical image stabilization. It can shoot 4K videos at 24, 30 and 60 fps, 1080p videos at 30, 60, 120 and 240 fps, and 720p videos at 30 fps. The front-facing camera is also same as the iPhone 8. It gets a 7 megapixel sensor with f2.2 aperture and it can only record 1080p videos at 30 fps. These specs might sound a bit underwhelming, but the image signal processor on the A13 Bionic chip and the computational photography features give the new iPhone SE a totally different photography experience. Interface of the camera app is similar to what we saw on the iPhone 11 and 11 Pro with just a few exceptions. Since this phone just has one camera, there is no lens selection button and there is no night mode option on this phone. Before we move on to the image and video samples, if you are new to this channel, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon next to it. That way, you won't miss out on any of the amazing videos coming up on this channel. As I mentioned at the start, I took a lot of images in various lighting conditions, but we are going to start with the ones that I took in bright daylight. I'm going to be honest with you guys. When I went out to take these images, I had already dismissed the camera on this phone by looking at its specs, and I wasn't expecting too much from it. But as I started taking these images, I was surprised by how well they turned out. You can see for yourself how good these images look. Although it is just a 12 megapixel sensor, that too a 2 or 2.5 year old one, it can still capture plenty of details. Even as I zoom in on these images, you can see how sharp the images are. On the first day when I took this phone out, the weather was bright and sunny, and on the very next day it was raining and completely overcast. Which is actually good because I got to see how the SE performed in these situations. And just as I expected after the first day, it did not disappoint me. Even in this diffused light, it kept on capturing detailed images and wonderful looking colors. Speaking of colors, in typical Apple fashion, they are very well balanced and not overly saturated. No matter the lighting conditions, the white balance is perfect in each of these shots and the colors look exactly how they were in real life. Now this is one of my favorite shots from the iPhone SE. This was also one of the first shots I took with it, and I wasn't too sure if it would turn out even half as good as it actually did. Looking at everything from the colors to details and dynamic range is just amazing in this shot. And this is when I knew this phone is no joke when it comes to the camera. I like that instead of saturating them and adding a lot of contrast, Apple chooses to keep these colors looking natural. If you don't like how these colors look, you can always edit the images and make them look however you want. The one-touch editing option in the built-in editor works like a charm. Thanks to the next-gen Smart HDR, dynamic range in these images is very impressive. Again, this is the same sensor from the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 10, but I have used both those phones and I don't remember the dynamic range on those phones being so good. All of this is thanks to A13's image signal processor and iOS 13. Just look at these shots. There is so much information in the shadows and highlights are not blown. This is another one of my favorite images. We are going to look at it again later on, but for now, look at the colors of the sky and how well this phone did to capture so many details in the shadows and in the sky. Coming to close-up shots, again, all of these look amazing. Just as you would expect from a good camera. Just pull it out, walk up to your subject, it sets the focus without any hesitation or trying too hard, and within a flash, you have such good looking close-up shots. Now since it is monsoon season, you are going to see a lot of water drop shots in my videos. But leaving that aside, let us try and analyze this shot. It was still raining, so the droplets were changing continuously, and the trees in the background were also moving continuously because it was very windy. but the iPhone SE had no problem taking this shot. While taking this image, I also had the OnePlus 8 with me, and while it ended up taking the shot, it took a lot longer to set the focus. You can see the subject closest to the camera, or the part that I tap on is in perfect sharp focus, and the foreground and background are very nicely blurred out. This is not a very large sensor, so there is no fringing on the edges of the objects, which is really nice. Let us take a look at the portrait shots from this iPhone SE. Since this phone gets a single camera, everyone including me was worried about how these shots would turn out. Like they did on the iPhone XR, edge detection and blurring of the background is all taken care of via software. We saw the Pixel phones with single cameras do this as well. But with those phones, you can only see the blur after the images were shot. But on this iPhone SE, you can see the amount of blur being applied in real time on your viewfinder. The A13 processor makes sure that these portrait shots would turn out just the way you want them to. Look at how well it separates the subject from the background. It still missed to keep some strands of hair in this shot in focus, but it was windy when I took these shots, so I won't read too much into it, and I'm really happy with the portrait shots from this iPhone SE. When it comes to portrait shots, it is not only about the edge detection, but you also have to look at the colors, skin tones, white balance of the entire image, details in the subject, and overall dynamic range. And the iPhone SE seems to be hitting all of the right spots. The only disappointing part for me is you can't take portraits of objects. This was same on the iPhone XR. Both of them have a single camera, and the software needs to detect a face to separate it from the background. Other than that, I don't find the portrait mode on this phone to be any different from the portrait mode on the iPhone 11, and that is saying a lot. Now moving on to images in artificial and lower lighting conditions. It does well and manages to keep the images looking good even as the light starts to go down. At f1.8, the aperture is wide enough to let in a lot of light on the sensor, and there is optical image stabilization, so the sensor can capture this light for a few extra milliseconds, which results in very usable images. But as the light gets lower, more and more noise starts to creep in these images. Even then, some of its images turned out to be phenomenal. We have seen this image before, but this time focus on the low light aspect of it. The sun had almost set and it was getting pretty dark for a smartphone's camera, but the SE still managed to pull out this incredible image. When there is ample light around, it still manages to take good looking images with the colors looking as they are in real life. But as we zoom in, we see a lot of noise and less details in the darker areas. Unlike the iPhone 11, there is no night mode on this phone. It has the same A13 processor as the iPhone 11 series, and I'm sure night mode depends on the software rather than on the camera sensor. So I think Apple could have enabled it on this phone, but for some reason they did not, leaving this phone in dark, pun intended. Now even without the night mode, if there is some amount of ambient light, you can take good looking images with it. Honestly, so far the low light performance has been the only underwhelming part of this camera. That too when you are in very low lighting conditions. If you are indoors or at some place where there is plenty of ambient light, it can still take good images. That brings us to the front facing camera. Before the iPhone 11, I was never too happy with the selfie camera on iPhones. And since this phone again uses the same sensor as the iPhone 8, I was not expecting to like it. But once again, I was wrong. I was judging it based on the on-paper specs, and those don't tell the complete story. Just look at these selfies. They are sharp, colors and skin tones look good, and even as I zoom in, we see them being very detailed. Now even with just a 7 megapixel sensor, Apple is doing some magic in the background, and that is making all of its images look really good. Even the portrait selfies are amazing from this phone. This phone doesn't have the true depth sensor like on the iPhone X, XR or the 11, so again all of this blurring is achieved via software, and I would say it is doing a really good job. Unlike other Android phones that we saw in some of my recent videos, this iPhone SE manages to capture really good dynamic range in these portrait shots. Now this phone is doing even better than the iPhone 11 when I have multiple faces in these portrait selfies, because the iPhone 11 just blurs out the second face even if it is just a few centimeters behind me. But this iPhone SE is doing well to keep them in focus as well. So the selfie camera gets a big thumbs up from me. Here's a video from the front facing camera of the iPhone SE. These videos are kept at 1080p 30fps. You can see how this phone handles the overall colors of the scene, exposure, and stabilization when I'm walking around with it. Coming to the video performance, iPhone SE can simply shoot the best videos in its price range. Look at how good this 4K 60fps video turned out. I have a feeling that the stabilization is not on the same level as the iPhone 11 and the 11 Pro. But these videos are looking very good nevertheless. When it comes to slow motion, it can shoot 1080p videos at 120 and 240 fps. While this video turned out to be much better than I would have imagined, I still think Apple should give us a few more frame rate options. I am sure the processor is very much capable of handling 1080p at 480 fps, so I just hope Apple enables it with a software update on all the new phones. All in all, I am really impressed with the camera on this iPhone SE. In my unboxing video, I said that 3 things that matter to me the most on any smartphone are the software, camera, and battery. Even before this video, we knew that the software part has been already taken care of by Apple, and my 2 main concerns were the battery and camera. Well, I am happy to tell you that other than in very low light, the cameras on this 2020 iPhone SE are very well equipped to take on any of its rivals. I am a bit disappointed by not being able to take the portraits of objects with the native camera app. But like I did on the iPhone XR, I can use some third-party apps like Halite to take those shots. And about low light, other than for these camera reviews and comparisons, I don't take too many images in lower light anyways, so this phone's low light performance is not a deal breaker for me. But if you are someone who takes a lot of images in lower light, I will strongly suggest you to consider the iPhone 11. You might feel that I am being overly excited for the cameras on this iPhone SE, but what I didn't tell you guys is I had the iPhone XR and the iPhone 11 along with me when I was taking these images, and looking at how little difference there is between these 3 cameras had got me surprised. I know I have already given away a lot by saying this, but I don't want to spoil the camera comparison video between these 3 phones, which by the way is coming up in the next few days. That video is going to be a very interesting one, so make sure you have the notifications turned on so you don't miss out when that video drops. I feel the iPhone SE 2020 is becoming a very good option for someone who likes smaller phones. If you are using any iPhone older than the 8, this iPhone SE is going to give you everything you hoped for, minus the bigger display. So these have been my thoughts about the cameras on this iPhone SE. Based on the images that you guys saw in this video, what do you guys think about it? Let me know in the comments. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.